everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Durham Community Safety and Wellness Task Force meeting. I'm Xavier, Cason. I'm one of the co-chairs, and I wanted to share my screen real quick to let you see the agenda. Okay, is the agenda showing? Somebody give me a thumbs up. It's not. Oh, it is? Great. Thank you. So here we have, we're going to do a recap from the town hall that one of our roundtables had back in October 15th to 16th. We have reflections from last month's report from Dr. Clemens. And we had a lot of question and answer. I'm not sure we got through all of it. So we're going to just give it one more chance to try to tie the findings and the report to our work currently. And the discussion of a task force, a task force discussion about community resources. There will be an opportunity to add something to agenda in a few minutes, but let me stop sharing that. As far as the values part of this, I did want to acknowledge that my co-chair is not here. And but I did ask her to kind of give me something in writing concerning the community resource conversation, and everything she said here kind of ties into our entire agenda. And so because her thoughts are so close to the values we have, I thought I'd just read out what she had sent me as our values portion of this opening. Task force members, this is from Marcia, of course. I'm not present with you tonight because I'm with my family celebrating my oldest son's marriage. It is a day full of Thanksgiving. Among her Thanksgivings is gratitude to the Crisis Response 911 Roundtable for the insightful, informative town hall meetings of October 15th and 16th. Even though I was not able to attend the entire time, the message received was clear and compelling. Our safety and well-being depend on relationships of trust, respect, and belonging. We are asking anew of each other for each other's to provide what is required for recovery and sustainable well-being. Shanise, Manju, Isaac, Xavier, thank you for bringing forth life experiences, both civic and personal, that describe what we seek most when in crisis. And what I heard is predictable, humane, non-judgmental attention. This understanding extends to Dr. Rajendran Clemens' research that exposes the distress and injustice of unpredictable, judgmental behavior from law enforcement officials towards young Black men in Durham's least safe neighborhoods. Protection from harm was not experienced as a right to predictable, humane attention, but as an event with the potential for misunderstanding and punishment. Those interviewed recognized that their safety and well-being ultimately depended on being respected and wholly valuable. The criminal legal system and violence interruption de-escalation roundtables are discovering similar truths. When we approach wrongdoing, harm, and crisis invested in what laws were broken by whom, and which punitive means to employ, we can easily ignore how others are impacted and what is ultimately needed from the community for an immediate and sustaining recovery for all involved. We are discovering our source of safety is from humane, interdependent relationships. I've come to realize how little we encourage and welcome emerging services to the community and how uncommon collaborations are among those dedicated to serving the many needs of residents. I hope we pursue fully identifying the social wealth of individuals and organizations in Durham and share this wealth with parents, students, teachers, violence interrupters, crisis responders, all who have harmed and all who have been harmed, to form bonds of trust, interdependency, and repair. Again, that's a statement from our co-chair as she's celebrating with her family. Also want to acknowledge that what she's saying is really a theme. I think it's a theme for us today about how we leverage the relationships in our community. So hopefully everything that we talked about kind of ties in to that general theme. We have a very robust roundtable meeting today with the 911 crisis response group. And I would like to entertain an opportunity I'm sorry. Entertain an opportunity to look at a recommendation that they have for us. Trying to get back to full screen. There we go. So before doing that, we would need to amend this agenda to make sure that we are able to bring on and make a change. I'm sorry. I got to pull up the. Okay.
As you're pulling it up, Mr. Cason, I just wanted to mention that Jennifer is also part of our roundtable, and I know that it was just a little mistake from Ms. Owens, but wanted to lift up Jennifer's role in hosting the crisis response roundtable.
Thank you. So these are, you should be seeing the minutes from the May 22nd meeting that we had where we talked about a voting process. If that's what you're looking at, thumbs up somebody. My screens and I don't like each other tonight. Just want to, since we haven't done any voting since then, we do a simple majority for all the votes except for recommendations to elected officials, in which we would need a 2/3 vote, which if you choose to amend the agenda, we would need that to move forward. We also made sure that we say that we were going to include reasons for hard no's if there's a no vote on a recommendation, so that person can be, their view can be represented. The 2/3 we decided was going to be 2/3 of the people present, or the members present at any given meeting. And so what we need at this point is a simple majority consensus to amend the agenda for a proposed recommendation from the 911 and crisis response roundtable. Just let me get where I can see everybody. We would need a motion from the floor to move forward.
I was going to say, is that a motion?
I can't make a motion, no, sir.
Okay, I move as such. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Jesse, seconded by, I think I heard Mike's voice, that we amend the agenda to entertain a recommendation from one of our roundtables. All in favor, if you would just put a thumb up, since I can't see everybody. All opposed, same sign. Okay, we will amend the agenda to move forward at this time, before we go to our town hall recap, into a proposed recommendation from our 911 crisis response group. I will once more attempt to share our screen one. Okay, so this is a proposed where they would like to offer a recommendation to our county commissioners. The proposal is a need for public discussion and input regarding proposed new youth detention center. And I will let someone else from the roundtable make your case.
I'd be happy to do so, and would invite others who've been following the question of a new youth detention center to add anything. This proposal is brought by Isaac Villegas, Jennifer Carroll, myself, Xavier, Cason. This proposal is brought to this task force today. We'd like to request, we'd like to request of this body that we make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to offer the public opportunity to understand the county's proposed new detention center, which is a proposal that's been in the works for the last 6 years, and invite more public input, particularly from directly impacted community members, including youth. And we offer this language. We ask the county commissioners to provide a minimum of 6 months for public comment regarding the plan for a new youth detention facility with special attention to the inclusion of directly impacted youth and families who are involved in the criminal legal system. As a task force charged by the commissioners with promoting community involvement in decisions regarding community safety and wellness, we would be glad to help provide forums for public comment from Durham residents during that time period. We further recommend that the county commissioners use this public comment period to explore all community proposals for alternatives to Durham County's new youth jail that promote youth wellness before moving forward with the current plan to construct a facility for youth incarceration. And the plan on the table, you can read about it at the county website. It's part of the capital improvement plan. Where they are in their process is hoping to begin building a new youth detention center in spring or summer of next year. They have approved $30 million of public funding towards building a new youth detention center and have a design in mind that is a green facility, state-of-the-art technology, and expansion of many beds. I think it's 35 or 36 beds that it would be expanded to. The concerns that those of us hope this does not come to pass are bringing to the table include that there's not a demonstrated need for an expanded facility, that there is language that suggests that it would be, that the county would be fulfilling its legal obligations to caring for Durham's youth by providing youth wellness alternatives. And probably our greatest concern is just that there hasn't been enough public input, particularly with the new array of considerations that were not true at the time that this proposal was initiated many years ago. So if folks have questions, I think some of us have been studying this carefully and might be able to answer some questions.
The only thing I'd add to that is that it's based on a proposal from 6 years ago that also includes a settlement regarding compliance with the juvenile justice detention and juvenile justice, JJDPA, Juvenile Justice Delinquency and Prevention Act. Basically, 6 years ago, Durham was locking up a lot more youth, and that facility was maybe at that time, with regard to the youth that they were locking up, too small. And so to base building a new facility on the current data, we think is not supported, because currently we lock up about 9 youth for every 23 to 24 days with around 26 beds. And at the time, so now we have a different DA. We don't prosecute the majority of cases that come from school. We don't detain nearly as many youth as we did 6 years ago. And the demographics and the trajectory of the county has changed in that time. And so should we not think of a more community-based and youth-driven way to invest those funds, as opposed to building a facility that it is likely that if you build it, you're going to fill it. If you build it, you're going to figure out a way to use it. So how about we invest those funds in something that more authentically and holistically represents the demands and the needs of the community as they have been articulated since then.
And just to reiterate, the heart of this proposal is asking the county commissioners to seek more up-to-date public input and encouraging the county commissioners to explore alternatives that promote youth wellness before moving forward with the current plan to construct a facility for youth incarceration. And it is a message, it's a recommendation to the county commissioners. But in our discussion about asking for this body to make this recommendation, we really want to acknowledge the role that the Board of Education plays and the role that the City Council plays in this question of how Durham's youth are cared for and attended to, and how we can prevent the situation where a young person is encountering the criminal legal system in the first place. Like we see the places where significant access to mental health care and therapeutic resources and support and recreational options and tutoring and so many of the things that we've heard the Durham Office of Youth report young people name as needs in their really thorough conversations with young people for the last couple of years. All of that feels significant to us. So this is a request to the county commissioners, but it might make sense for us to be bringing other puzzle pieces to the other municipal bodies.
If I could pipe in super quickly, I've received a couple of requests in the chat for links to the proposal. Those links are in the chat, but I wanted to briefly draw or lift up some language that's in the capital improvement summary document on the county website. This was not written yesterday. I believe the document's from 2020, but it titles the project New Youth Home. Under project description, it says this project is to construct a new 36-bed youth home and assessment center. In the fiscal year 2017-2018, the board approved funding to complete a master plan review of site and environmental assessment of property to determine the feasibility of a new facility on the existing site. They talk about the companies who did the study. The focus of the study was increasing the total number of beds in the facility from 14 to 24, in addition to an assessment center. And then there is a note at the bottom. It says it is important to note the program study only provided construction cost estimates for 24 beds and an assessment center. However, conversation is ongoing on the potential need to increase bed capacity to 35 to 40 beds to accommodate growth. The passage of the Juvenile Justice Reinvestment Act, which increased the age of juvenile court jurisdiction to include crimes committed by 16 and 17-year-olds, previously possible to try as adults. After December 1st, 2019, this population committing felonies shall no longer be confined to adult detention facilities, which creates the need for increased capacity at the youth home.
We're noting that that raised the age legislation that's being used as justification was actually just passed in the last year and was not true at the time that this new youth detention center was first proposed. Do folks have questions?
Mike set his hand up.
Yeah, I think it seems to me obvious that we should support this proposal for the county to just, pump the brakes and take some time to get more community input. But then this seems to support what we started talking about the last meeting, that juvenile justice, juvenile wellness should definitely be something the task force takes on as a new and I think distinct topic deserving of its own roundtable. And I think the sooner we could collectively come to some consensus about that, the sooner we could communicate to the city and the county and the school board in a sense that we've got this. The task force seems to be the logical place to, given our experience, given our setup, roundtables, listening sessions, that we would be an appropriate body with a dedicated roundtable to do it, to get this community input, to study how to best to use this funding. But as Manju's saying, the bigger piece, it's not just about a new youth home, whether it should happen, and if so, how big or whatever, but the holistic, the wraparound approach to juvenile wellness and justice that involves a lot more than that. It involves the schools, all kinds of things that were already in various roundtables, crisis response, violence interruption. So it just seemed like an obvious thing for us to take on. And I think the sooner we could let the county commission know this is something the task force is committed to tackling, the sooner they'd be, presumably, and the more willing they'd be to say, okay, we'll give you guys the time to further examine this and come to us in the city with proposals about whether to, expand the current home if at all, and probably need some, but then what else to do with this 30 million, and what other ways could we better serve Durham's youth?
Thanks,
And I
Mike.
don't know, we don't think we need to put that in a resolution or part of this, but it's a decision we as a roundtable probably have to come to pretty soon. But then, the county commissioners and the city council members and the school board members who sit on our task force will learn that and can pass that, hopefully that decision along.
Thank you.
Mhm. I only wanted to add one additional point, which is that I think the county commissioners may understandably feel a little bit frustrated by the timing of this recommendation, since the new youth home has been part of the capital improvement plan for a minute. And I wanted to acknowledge that, and in relation to that, acknowledge the fact that the pandemic has made everything weird. And I think a lot of people who are usually very, very plugged into what's going on with the city were kind of surprised by this plan. So our communication chains aren't as strong as they used to be. Our meetings aren't happening as often as they used to. Zoom is just different. So I would be grateful for any sort of patience that the county commissioners could afford us, and just try to emphasize that, I think especially with something like this, it's important to take a little bit of extra time, just because of how the last year and a half has been and how it has changed our capacity to have these conversations.
Do folks have other clarifying questions about the proposal? I was using the everyone function just in case there are non-panelists in the public who are listening, so that if we hope for the public to see documents we're linking, let's use everyone. So I just reposted all of it. One of the links that Xavier shared is the specific language of the proposal. Do folks have clarifying questions?
I think I have one clarifying question. In the event that this proposal gets passed, have you all laid out a timescale of sorts to plan out when you would reach out to the county commission and plan out forums and stuff like that, or convene about hosting forums and hosting Google Forms or anything to that nature to get some public input or to collect public input?
That's a great question. As far as any of the recommendations coming out of this body, the co-chairs would immediately move it forward to the elected bodies that are included, or for whom it is intended for. Working with the clerk or our liaison with the city to make sure that we're doing it in the proper channels. But I would immediately, if it were passed, work with Amber to make sure it gets to the correct persons. As far as the listening sessions that would come from the second part of recommendation, that would be, I think that would be something that depends on the response from the county commissioners. And also to address Mike's comment about having a youth criminal legal system roundtable, we are having discussions with persons. We're finding, and as we've said over the last couple of task force meetings, that roundtable members' capacity is stretched, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of consensus for adding another one at this time. But there are a lot of things that are connected, which is one reason Martha and I put these items on our agenda. We think that the things we're talking about today really could easily be looked at and tackled from any of our roundtables. And I would not be opposed to having some joint meetings between two of the roundtables that are tackling something very similar from different angles. But back to this recommendation. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, we would be open to yes, Jesse.
I just had one, and it's more of a, I guess, clarifying question based on what I'm seeing in the chat. Commissioner Burns, I wasn't aware of a juvenile crime prevention council. Are you able to speak to that at all, and who, like, what's the membership of that and how that functions? Just at least in relation to the conversation we're having now, that would be helpful for me and maybe others.
The only thing that I'll answer your question. I have so many thoughts. I will answer your question. Thank you, Jesse, for acknowledging me and not just saying county commissioners as if I'm not sitting here. I really appreciate that. I only brought it up because Mike said that, this would be the perfect body to have that conversation. And I just wanted to, lift up that there are multiple task force that focused on juvenile justice. So right now here in Durham, and I'm a member of the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council. So right now we currently go through a grant process and we actually fund a number of nonprofits here in Durham that focus on aiding individuals who have either entered the criminal justice system at a young age or are in at potential of entering the criminal justice system. So also some of the work that the council does is for prevention. So we don't see as many federal dollars coming down as we used to. So the city and the county took it upon themselves to dedicate dollars to prevent individuals even entering the juvenile crime system. I would also like to elevate, the county also started a new department that we rolled out last week. It's the Community Intervention and Support Services Department. So we have expanded our census tracts for Bull City United. We do have some positions opened under Project Build. We also have some positions open right now. Well, not right now, it's not open yet, for My Brother's Keeper. So we do have these expanded opportunities that we are focusing on for crime prevention with our youth, specifically looking at Black and brown boys. So it is not there. I only elevate those to say, as the task force looks back at what their mission statement is, there are a multitude of organizations that the county and the city currently fund that focus in on these issue areas. And I'm not even talking about the Violent Crimes Roundtable, which when you're talking about that juvenile, the youth detention center, this is the only thing I will say about this, because this is the first time anyone has ever vocalized anything to me or any of the other county commissioners ever about this. We've seen it on the news every day, but no one has ever actually come to us and talked to us about it. So I'm not going to talk about it because I respect myself. But what I will say is there are a number of fallacies. There are a number of truths. And I would remind anyone as they're doing their research, there were multiple roundtables done. Number one, there have been continued roundtables. I know the parents of the children in those facilities. And what I would say is I'm hopeful that whatever roundtables individuals choose to have, that they are not one-sided and that we look at the actual individuals, because when that facility was supposed to close, it was Reverend Ammons at Union Baptist Church, whose son was there. And Marcia Moore was at the table, who begged to have that facility to stay here. So I'm not going to voice my opinion, but there's a level of arrogance around this conversation, as if there was no community input, as if those parents were not at the table when this decision was made. And I would respectfully request that research be done as well. And I will end with, we are not dealing with garden variety shoplifters. Individuals that are in the facility go to Superior Court. So that's first degree murder. That's first degree rape. That is assault and sexual assault with a deadly weapon. So I do believe that we can save our babies. I swear I believe that we can swear our babies. I wouldn't have put myself in this position, but I'm hopeful that as people write letters to the county commission with half-truths, that they be prepared that when they see us, they will get whole truths. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. I think at least for me, it's helpful because I'm not aware of all of the other task forces and commissions that exist across the city, the county, or even within the school board, even though that's still under the county. And it's just helpful. And again, yeah, I did want to acknowledge your presence, but I didn't want to put you on the spot either if you didn't feel like speaking, so, but thank you for that feedback. I think I'll just add while I have the proverbial mic, so to speak, in that I echo Xavier's comments in that at least within the SRO roundtable, I feel like we've had some tangential conversations about this, and I think there's space where we can listen actively and continue doing work to solicit feedback that may relate to this particular topic of the Youth Detention Center. And that's very much in line with our mission for alternatives to policing. So I think that's well within our lane of influence and the purpose of our work. So I appreciate just hearing the perspectives and the reminder of kind of what people have said in the past, but also just the posture to continue listening and being open to feedback. So thank you all for sharing tonight.
Any other comments or questions? Is there a motion to bring the recommendation to the floor?
So moved.
Is there a second? Isaac, was that a second? Didn't come through.
Sorry, yes, I second it.
Okay, thank you. It's a moved and second that we put forth this recommendation from this task force. It requires a 2/3 vote, which would be 7 of the 11 people here, if my math is correct. Okay, so I will ask for a voice vote to make sure we record it correctly.
Can you
Yes.
restate the exact motion, please?
Yes, please.
Absolutely. And I will put it back onto the screen. It says that we ask the county commissioners to provide a minimum of 6 months for public comment regarding the plan for a new youth detention facility, with special attention to the inclusion of directly impacted youth and families who are involved in the criminal legal system. As a task force charged by the commissioners with promoting community involvement in decisions regarding community safety and wellness, we will be glad to help provide forums for public comment from Durham residents during that time period. We further recommend that the county commissioners use this public comment period to explore all community proposals for alternatives to Durham County's new youth jail that promote youth wellness before moving forward with the current plan to construct a facility for youth incarceration. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is everybody ready for?
I have a question before the vote, please.
Yes, sir.
Given what Commissioner Burns said, I don't know if the task force wants to acknowledge that she said there were already discussions with some of these groups, and acknowledging that we perhaps may want to say, oh, sorry, I was using the narrative.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Right, so we may want to amend the language to say we ask that the county commissioners to provide an additional 6 months as opposed to, since there was already, am I understanding it properly, Commissioner Burns, that there were already these discussions?
Yeah, when I said these discussions, in 2015, 2016, yes, and I think there's been collectively 7 meetings where it was on the agenda or the on regular session agenda, or it was on work session agenda. So I only point out that, and I could be wrong about the 6 or 7. I know that there's been at least once or twice where updates have been given to us. So those are just 11 examples of public comment that I can think of. And again, that is off the top of my head that I can think of that we've had. And everyone was at the table, especially when this came up. And it came up when this facility, which is insured for 30 years, was going to be torn down. And it's now 41 years old. And the decision was made to build something that had more beds, an assessment center, and for it to be partially funded by the state. So I did want to throw those things out. I appreciate that. I mean, by all means, this decision was made in the vacuum outside of us. So by all means, I want people to vote their conscience and move forward. But because I'm giving you just a few things now. Best believe
Right,
facts will follow.
Right, and I appreciate that, and I recommend to that the task force acknowledge what you said. And I'm suggesting, as a mere servant here, that we insert the word additional before 6 months. And I think that would be something that better suits all of us.
Councilmember Caballero, do you see your hand?
Yeah, it's fine because it was clarified what the additional and what the intent was. Also, I don't vote. I just was curious about what the intent behind the additional was, and now I understand it. Thank you.
No, and you are here as a resource as well.
I would just like to say that for the most part, I can name maybe 2 elected officials who were in current, at that time when a lot of those conversations and decisions were being made. And I would say that our national context is vastly different than it was in 2015. I'm sure that's already been stated. And so I think that providing this additional comment period is a benefit to the Durham community. And I think in line with how we want to do outreach generally, I think that as a city and as a community, how we did outreach in 2015 is vastly different than what we're trying to accomplish today.
I will share it again. I will say in our conversations, of course, this went through several drafts, and the intent was to expand public comment. Mm-hmm. And if it looks like it says there was none, that was never the intent. And no disrespect intended, Commissioner Burns, or to any of the commissioners or anybody who was involved in this. So there's to the committee that brought this up, there's a recommendation to say instead of a minimum of 6 months is to provide an additional 6 months for public comment. Okay, I'm getting thumbs up from Jennifer and Isaac and for those who crafted this. Okay, and are there any other questions, or is there readiness to bring this to a vote?
Mike's hand is raised.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mike.
Well, and it just to reinforce what you're just saying, Xavier, that I could see where the language could give the impression, the original language could give the impression that we thought there hadn't been any comment on the specific youth detention facility, and the additional clarifies that we appreciate the time that the county commission put into this original decision. And perhaps it doesn't need to be added to this resolution, but if we could make it, at least in our intent moving forward, that whoever takes the onus of this additional public comment and study period can take the opportunity to make that an inquiry on the broader topic of youth wellness and justice, not merely the specific issue of a new expanded detention center. Since Commissioner Burns, I assume that was understandably the focus of these earlier roundtables and deliberation the county did was on the specific question of fixing the existing youth center, not the broader topic of opportunities for youth wellness and justice that have grown so much, as Jennifer was saying, over these past 5-6 years. So just if we understand that that's the intent, I don't know that you need to add additional wording to this resolution, that the public comment period could perhaps give itself the opportunity to take on the broader topic, not merely $30 million for a youth detention facility. Well, that's clearly part of it, but other elements go into youth justice wellness beyond justice.
Mike, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying totally. Are you saying to amend it further, or are you saying?
I don't. I mean, why? It's. I think it's well written with this suggested addition. I don't think you need to clutter it up. I just think since Mr. Burns is here and other elected officials are here, they can certainly, hopefully, appreciate the intent of this period of additional comment isn't just, and obviously kind of it would go without saying, rather than just starting from scratch, whoever would be holding these new listening sessions would take a close look and listen at all the results of the earlier roundtables that Mr. Burns is mentioning had happened. So why ask the same questions again? If those folk that a group of people have been heard from, and then focus on getting other information from people who hadn't been heard from and exploring topics that hadn't had an opportunity, rather than repeating earlier efforts and unintentionally diminishing them in the process. Since anybody who spent a lot of time on those could understand it will be somewhat, take some offense if you guys spent all this time on this, but we're pretending like we're starting over.
Now, I would also, I appreciate that, Mike. I also like to mention in our discussion earlier, which was on a public meeting for this roundtable, all of our roundtable meetings are public, and on YouTube, Zoom, however, I guess it's a Zoom link. I did mention then, and I'll reiterate now in this public meeting, that in my time working as an elected official, I can say that there were times I was perplexed at even all that we did do to make sure that the public had input. There was still a lot of people saying, I didn't know this, and this. And, just the systems that we use to make decisions when we do have community engagement possibly need to be expanded in some ways. I don't know. And I feel like in the discussion we had earlier, we decided that we would love to see some expansion of public comment. Because we know that even my experience, again, has been even with the best intentions of moving forward and gathering information, if the word's not out, the word's not out. And I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but that's what this is about, to try to create some expanded time to make sure that people are truly aware.
Chairperson Cason, Manju's hand is now down, but it's back up. So Manju had her hand up first, and then Jennifer.
Thank you.
Commissioner Burns, could we ask that the County Commission share specifically who has made public comment and what they've shared on this subject?
I'm perplexed at that question. You can get a public records request on anything, Manju. I've reiterated that to you millions of times. Much like the 911 data that you all requested 3 months ago, but we only got a public records request for it last Tuesday. If it's turned in and it's timely and it's not behind anything else, absolutely. So I don't want it to look like I'm the gatekeeper of public information. When you request something, you get access to it. So that's a yes.
Do we need to file a formal public records request to learn this, or would it be enough to ask you as our liaison to the Board of County Commissioners?
I would, so that you could get a complete history of it. I was in Durham and remember those conversations very well, but I was not a public official. At that point, Marcia was still a judge. She was at that round table. Let's see, Wendy was not there, but she was on the planning commission. So I reject the premise that there are only 2 people who were in elected office. There were people in different elected offices, but they were still in elected office. I would respectfully request that you would send it in so that you can get a complete picture, because I think what else you would get in that complete picture, it wasn't just a conversation about a brick and mortar building as I inserted. I only did that to keep my comments short because I recognize we're on a timetable and I myself have other engagements. I would argue there's a reason why there's more classrooms. There's a reason why there's an assessment center. There's a reason why there's a wellness portion, because when the community came together, they didn't just want to build another jail. They didn't. And I would also lift up, I don't know everyone's work on here, but I know how much work I've done in the jails. I know how much I've sat on death row. And I will never forget during the McCoy administration, I walked around and I saw 14, 15, and 16-year-old girls at NCCIW. And I said, why are they here? Because the only place to house an underage girl at that point was death row. It was the only place they could go because there were no beds. So I can appreciate what you all are saying, and I can appreciate the stories that you all have. But again, and I'm listening. I'm actually listening and taking all this in and taking notes. I'm hopeful that that courtesy is extended to those parents and those families who currently have children there. Because even they are perplexed by what they have seen in the media, especially since some of them and some pastors and people in the community fought very hard to get wellness and to get things added and to get classrooms added and to make sure it was state of the art and make sure it was green and make sure workforce development was a component. So yeah, that was a long answer to your question, but so that you can have a complete picture, I would ask that you do just send it in to our county manager. I asked to be CC'd on it so that I can usher it through. I wasn't CC'd on the public records request that came in 3 months late, but I'll just keep following up with my staff about when it comes through. And I will do my best to make sure that you all get access to whatever it is you're asking for.
Our hope is to see all that youth wellness, but to see it as accessible to young people without having to be incarcerated to access those resources.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Who do you, we have some great, I don't want to get into a debate because this is not my forum. For the 14 individuals, do you know what the makeup is? 99% of it, 99% of the folks there, it's violent crime. This is not shoplifting. This is not a stolen car. I've said that before because I don't want, the numbers are so small, I don't want to pinpoint things. So I actually do believe that folks should have access to wellness. I'll stop there because I don't want to get into a tit for tat, but I think we're talking about two different sets of young people. I think Durham has a whole bunch of youth development and criminal justice programs. I think we have some great diversity. I wish we had some better ones. There's some I would love to put more money into because they work better than other ones. I'll stop there because I don't think, again, I've been in the facility, I've been in institutions all over North Carolina. And I don't like the idea of jails either, but and I recognize that state law was only changed last year, but I think there's something to be said about allowing people to shelter in place closer to their parents while we still live under this law that treats our children like adults.
I just want to give some context to the language of offering space for public comment regarding the plan for a new youth detention facility. When we reached out to the Board of County Commissioners asking what kind of opportunity for public comment had been available and what sort of public comment had already been pursued, we were referred to a series of times where the Board of County Commissioners has discussed the subject, but where members of the public had not actually tuned in for these meetings and offered public comment, right? Like there's a difference between us having a public meeting like this that's available to the public and folks actually being recruited from their busy lives to share their firsthand experience and their thoughts and concerns. And we're asking for a more deliberative, democratic process that meets folks where they are to hear their lived experience. We were told by the Board of County Commissioners that there had been stakeholders who had been formally consulted as community stakeholders, and we were offered a list, which I can share with y'all here. Would it be useful for me to share screen and just show the list of community stakeholders who were consulted?
Well, I just want to bring our attention. I'm suggesting, if it is not directly related to the motion, that we put it aside and focus on passing the motion, because nearly an hour has exceeded.
Yeah, I agree, because the motion is still, I mean, we already made a motion in a second, so technically, like, we're in the middle of the motion still.
Absolutely.
So, and there's some resonance or agreement with the slight edit that I offered. I know Isaac seconded that, and I think simply saying 6 additional months and submitting that for an official proposal to the county commission, and then continuing to do what we're doing, because I think what we're doing as a task force, like, no one's saying we shouldn't continue listening to folks and exploring alternatives to policing. And as it relates to the Youth Wellness Center, that's what we'll do. That's our lane. I think we have enough understanding to carry out our votes. I mean, I want to respect Jennifer and Tyler haven't had a chance to speak. I also want to respect the rest of our agenda, because it's almost 7 o'clock.
Well, we want to take those.
I can just share a link where people can read for themselves that list.
That would be helpful. We're taking these last 2 questions and then we'll move on with the vote.
I only had a quick point of order. I mean, I do feel compelled to repeat something that's come up in our task force a lot, which is what a privilege it is to even have these debates about these particular issues. And I'm really grateful for everyone showing up here and being real with each other, and I'm grateful. But I just wanted to point out that Dr. Boone had made a request, which I found exceedingly reasonable, which is that if we could have, I see that you're in a PDF reader right now, Xavier, but would it be possible to amend the text, like in a Word document, so that we could see the text that we're voting on?
Yeah, I do have it in another document.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's all I had.
Mm-hmm. Tyler?
I'll pass in the sake of time. Thank you.
Okay, I've got it in a Google Doc. An additional 6 months. Is that correct?
Jesse, how did you say it? You said it well. I can't remember.
It was
I
to
said
provide a minimum
of 6 additional months. Correct. Yes.
Hi, Jesse.
No, you're fine. We're on the same page. We're gonna keep moving forward.
To provide an additional 6 months, is that fine? Or do you want to say a minimum of?
That's what I had recommended, just to sort of honor the original language, but incorporate the sentiment that I think was reflected by Commissioner Burns, that was to acknowledge what has already been taking place and the request that more be had, considering the shift in dynamics and everything that has been aforementioned.
Thank you. With that, we'll call for the vote. On this recommendation, I'll just go on my screen. I'll start with Samuel. Aye or no?
Aye.
Okay. Manju?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Isaac?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Dr. Boone?
Aye.
Jesse?
Yes, aye.
Tyler?
Aye.
Nori?
Aye.
Shanise?
Aye.
Muffin?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. The recommendation passes unanimously as amended. Thank you for that. So we had, as a roundtable that was bringing this up, we had already said that we would cede some of our time for the town hall recap. So we will move past that and move into the reflections on Dr. Clemens' report. Just want, for those who are, it's been a minute, it's been a month exactly. Just want to remind you of some of the things that were brought to us, where her research questions were: how do civilians in heavily policed communities make sense of and assess police? What policy preferences result from the criteria they use to assess police? There were three top themes that were highlighted that the participants of the interviews, of the research, amongst the things they were saying, three themes emerged on top: stop harming and threatening us, be a part of the community, protect us from criminal threats. There were 25 policy recommendations that she's looking at. And Dr. Clemens mentioned that the purpose for making recommendations is to forge a tight connection between participants' expectations of officers and the outcomes that they are given. Mentioning that in those top themes, they talked about, from a policy standpoint, policies around pointing weapons, about requiring weekly community service, and having a community level body with veto power. There was some discussion from task force members around those recommendations and those findings. Just want to give Dr. Clemens, since she's here with us again, a chance to answer any additional questions. My question, is really concerning, as we go forth in our work and start to produce recommendations, how we might, really use this information as we're making our deliberations. Or were there any other things that you had that I did not use and did not put in my summary that I should have said, Dr. Clemens? I'm gonna give you the floor real quick.
Oh, thank you very much, Co-Chair Cason. That was a fantastic summary. I couldn't have done it better myself. I will say, having re-reviewed the bylaws, the part that I had been focused on, as far as the mission is concerned, a joint community-led task force charged with examining the public safety and wellness needs of Durham residents and communities and providing recommendations for additional programs to enhance public safety and wellness that rely on alternatives to policing in the criminal legal system. So I fully understand and appreciate that some folks naturally would have wanted me to cover alternatives to policing. That is the core mission of the task force. And I'm sorry if folks were disappointed that that's not what the crux of my presentation was about. The first part of that mission, which is to examine public safety and wellness needs and provide recommendations. I don't focus on programs, I really focus on policy. But to enhance public safety and wellness fall squarely within the confines of my study. And so from their perspective, they were responding to questions about what it takes for them to be safe and to feel safe. The be safe part falls under that, the safety part of the mission, and the feel safe part falls under the wellness portion of the mission. And so the recommendations absolutely are talking about what police departments can do to enhance those two things. And I think that that's a great opportunity to sort of dovetail with the alternatives agenda. So from my perspective, I thought it was worthwhile to share the parts that you can lift out to complement the alternatives that are very closely tied to what what community folks were telling me they needed to both be safe and to feel safe, and to understand how that dovetailed really tightly with what those alternatives could look like. I will say that at the end of the 2-hour interviews that I had with folks, I asked a larger question, that is, if you had the full attention and concern of anyone in power to fix or improve anything in your life, what would it be? And so here, there were certainly themes of stronger democratic representation for poor folks. They talked about overhauling the transportation system so folks aren't spending half their paychecks to get to where they want to go in 2 hours, right? On living wages that allowed them to engage in meaningful work and have dignity and respect while doing it, in access to health and certainly mental health. There was just unbelievable trauma that folks had experienced and had no access to heal with support, with professional support. And of course, affordable housing. And so those are the things that they outlined would be in some, sort of general social supports, criminal justice reforms, but those are the things that they outlined would be pathways to the middle class, which they certainly desired. And so in that sense, I think that they are very much speaking to the deep public investments that need to be made in the community. At the same time, they would, I think, feel, as best I understand what they were telling me, I think they would feel as if they were full citizens of society, if they felt that police were providing them with the same service and the same protections as their counterparts. And so what they shared with me was sort of bringing together the both sides of that they were being fully invested in as members of society and that they were being protected and served by law enforcement. And I would appreciate any opportunity to clarify, any part of my presentation, or if you want to go in a different direction, I welcome that discussion as well.
Any questions from any task force members? And again, relating her work to our work, particularly in what you're doing through roundtables. Just want to give you another opportunity to make that connection. I appreciate what you've given us already just now. Jennifer.
Thank you again for joining us. And I apologize if I'm asking you to repeat yourself because my brain always starts sparking when I listen to you talk. But did you learn anything that you might be able to summarize about, in addition to how your participants envisioned their ideal relationship with the community being, or their ideal relationship with law enforcement being? Are you able to speak at all to their view of not just how law enforcement should do their job better or well, but like what that job is, what they should be doing in a really fundamental sense?
Sure. I mean, aside from, stopping the harm that's currently being done, really being community stewards. They wanted officers who were very professional, who were composed, who were able to manage their own fear and emotions and anger. Officers who could, not only compose themselves, but de-escalate others so that they were mediating, that they were problem solving, that they were being able to create peaceful resolutions to conflict. In some cases, very immediately, and in some cases, doing kind of long-term work to create sort of peaceful environments. And they wanted them to be community stewards. So they wanted them to be caring and discerning. So it's not so much that they wanted them to, one might think that if you're concerned about discretion, that you might restrict discretion, right? If you're concerned about arbitrariness, or if you're concerned about sort of very uneven outcomes, then your strategy might be to restrict discretion. But that's actually not what I found. What I found is that they sort of leaned into officers having discretion, but that they wanted to ensure then that those officers were very discerning, that they had superior judgment. And so then that comes in the hiring portion and making sure that you're getting a really high quality person who does have a record of service, of professionalism, of composure, of judgment. And so that you're filtering for that on the front end and then reinforcing it through, policy setting, standards, training, and accountability.
Yeah, and so within that framework, law enforcement is envisioned by your participants as an emergency first responder, right? And
absolutely.
Yeah, and if I'm getting beyond the scope of your project, tell me and I'll shut up. But so the idea is it's not just that they wanted community stewards; they wanted officers of the law to fill the role as community stewards.
Yes, and it's actually important that those two come together, because for a few reasons. One, yes, they definitely wanted officers to be well equipped. They wanted them to be competent and do their jobs, which they saw as stopping crime and keeping peace. But at the same time, they did not believe that officers who did not care about the community were capable of protecting them. So they actually didn't think it was possible for officers to protect and serve without caring for the community. Well, how can you tell that officers care? Well, by having the opportunity to observe them and their character, by seeing them actually caring for folks and serving them on a daily basis, and having lots of opportunities for interaction where they are rolling up their sleeves, they're diving in, and they are like making someone's lives better in very concrete ways. So that's where the recommendation for community service came from. They literally said things like that. They literally said that they wanted to see them serving folks, helping youth, helping young folks, interacting with them. Like I said, in the last meeting, I was surprised by some of the things that I heard, but it was 81% of the group said something along those lines. And I'll just and so on that first part about responding, using police as emergency responders, I'll just read like a quick paragraph. This is coming from my study. So 71% had been victims of crime. 52% had been a victim of a violent crime, like being robbed or robbed at gunpoint, right, or stabbed. 57% had witnessed a stabbing, shooting, or murder. And though 20 of 21 participants held negative views toward police, right, 16 of those 20, or 80%, simultaneously expressed some positive opinion or feelings toward police. And so this may help explain why, even though 2/3 had been arrested and 52% had been convicted of a crime, over 3/4 either would call police or had called police to report a crime, or had already shared important information with police investigators, and an additional participant would have someone else call the police in an emergency. So there were 3 who reported they would never call the police under any circumstances, but would call 911 for an ambulance if someone were hurt. And then 1 participant said he didn't feel comfortable calling the police now, but was unwilling to rule it out as a future possibility. So, it's more just understanding that, folks' relationship to law enforcement is complicated, it's nuanced, it's complex, and to oversimplify it or sort of caricaturize it, will do a disservice to the work. Sorry, that was perhaps a little longer than you. I
loved every second of it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you for that. Dr. Clemens, if you could put your email in the chat as well.
Sure, absolutely.
I know people are asking for your report, but we know this research is still undergoing. You're still doing the work and so forth, and it's not yet fully published, so you can't really share everything just yet. Is that correct?
Right now it's a dissertation, but
Right.
I am, but I'm happy to, I'm happy to share aspects that you want, that you would request, right? And so, for example, if you're interested in to the full list of policy recommendations, I'm happy to send those to you. Now there are different kinds of policy recommendations, right? There are some that are much more closely tied to the wellness or to the safety. For example, the policy on basically with the goal of reducing the amount of times that police officers are pointing their guns at people, right? And reducing the risk of shootings, of unintentional shootings, or intentional shootings. But if you stop that from the beginning and lower the risk of them overly using or pointing their weapons, that is something that's very closely tied to what they said. And those were one of the 3 policy recommendations I shared. Now, there are other policy recommendations that are a little bit more abstract from what they shared, because they wanted an outcome and I had to kind of back up in order to find a policy mechanism to do that. For example, if you wanted really high quality, the high quality police officers who are less likely to make mistakes, right? Because there's so many, whether it's teachers or whether it's doctors or whether it's police officers, often are learning on folks in these communities, right? And so, and when they often get more experience, they are transferring to other parts of the city or whatever. And so you could flip that around. Not that there aren't rookies who are great, but you could flip it around actually and incentivize the officers to actually come into the community and be selecting the top officers to do that. So that's something that could be incentivized rather than folks who are less experienced. So that's a little bit more abstract, and I would welcome your guidance if there are certain kinds of policy recommendations you'd want to see, or if you just want to see them all.
Thank you for that. And that would be the from the roundtables. If you have certain areas that you are interested in, you let us know so we can make those requests from Dr. Clemens. We appreciate you being with us again. Dr. Boone, do we have time to look at the proposal that you have? I follow your lead on this.
May I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this won't be very long. So as let me put it on slide view. So as you look at this particular image, it may be overwhelming. And what your eyes see may be different than what my eyes see. So when I look at this, oh goodness, let me back up. Okay, this one. So, and it's the same slide, but it's at the beginning. So when we look at this, and you don't have to recognize all of the names and organizations that are here, but this shows to me the wealth of services that we have in Durham that we are able to glean from in order to do what needs to be done. And picking out the grassroots nonprofits and individuals that are associated with the kinds of things that are happening. Also the health department, the Juvenile Justice Resource Center. I mean, all of the things that we're talking about. We have a system or systems in Durham that if we join together in a pipeline, we can get some things done. So you may have seen this from me before, and as I continue in this presentation, I want you to keep in mind that it's not only young people that need our help. The individuals that surround young people in whatever system or institution that we're talking about need to be whole and healthy in order to help those that they work with. So we're talking about a system of resilience that is community-wide, that's based on grassroots, and that also helps to ensure the resilience and well-being of all citizens. And it sounds big, it is big, but there's a way to get it done. So when we look at the tree on the left, and we look at climate experiences, and COVID-19 is there. So what this talks about is the impact that climate, tornadoes, floods, droughts, whatever it is, and COVID-19 impact the lives of Black and Brown people more than anyone else. If we look at adverse childhood experiences, which is depicted on the right, if these 10 things, 4 or more of these 10 things happen before someone's 18th birthday, we're talking about youth, before someone's 18th birthday, when they reach adulthood, there are risk outcomes that are possible. Physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, mental illness, incarcerated relative, mother treated violently or parent treated violently, substance use, or divorce, 4 or more. If there's 6 or more, it could result in 20 years lost life expectancy cut by 20 years. So when we think about what we want to do in this space, and we look at the possible risk outcomes, lack of physical activity, smoking, alcoholism, drug use, missed work, severe obesity, diabetes, depression, suicide attempts, STDs, heart disease, cancer, stroke, COPD, broken bones, then looking at the trauma that a child experiences is the place that we may need to start with the young people that we're talking about. I have done presentations, and I wasn't going to talk about me, but I'll just say this one thing, is that I've provided information to over 6,000 individuals with the help of Duke in looking at this as a research project. And so, if we need to know how research fits into this, then that documentation is available. I also want you to see the impact, the compound impact on individuals. So that's adverse childhood experiences. Then there are adverse community experiences. So imagine someone that's experiencing past trauma and now they're an adult, or have experienced trauma and they're a child. The brain forgets, but the body remembers, and the adolescent brain doesn't fully develop until someone is 25 years old. So when we're talking about young people, we really need to talk about them in terms of 25 years old, but also what happened to you? What's right about you? And I'm not trying to make this, a small Pollyannish situation, but it's really true. And if we have systems that help with the resilience of a child, when they can be stabilized and can receive the information, then we have an opportunity to do great things. So adverse community experiences are poverty and violence, poor housing quality, discrimination, lack of social capital, lack of economic mobility, lack of opportunity. And then there are atrocious cultural experiences: genocide, slavery, colonization, forced family separation, segregation, harmful social norms. So when we look at our community as a whole, and we want to think about what we can do in these situations, there's something that is on the horizon. So we want solutions that are developed through grassroots. And as Commissioner Burns was talking about speaking to people, being there with people. I've been there with people as well. And now community health workers are out there being with people as well. So we may look at equality, which means, okay, we'll give everybody a bicycle so they'll have wheels to get where they need to go. But that may not be enough, because equity says, I'm going to give you wheels that fit you and your situation, where you are and what you need. Very briefly, I want to mention just a couple of things in terms of violent death reporting, and it's from the North Carolina Injury and Violence Prevention Branch. Now, we may understand that these things are happening. Suicide, this is in Durham, over almost a 20-year or so span. Suicides account for the manner of death 42% of the time, homicide 53% of the time. Manner of death by race, and you can look at what happens in terms of suicide, homicide, and all violent deaths. But where does this begin? Where does the trauma begin that causes people to be in the state that they are in? So the next slide shows the circumstances of suicide. Depressed mood, current mental health problem, current mental health treatment, history of suicide attempts, left a suicide note, disclosed intent, physical health problems. Further, I have data on young people and their experience with trauma, their experience with suicide attempts. There's a lot of trauma out there. 89% of the girls that are in the juvenile justice system have diagnosed stressor and trauma-related disorder. And I know we talk about men and boys all the time. I'm happy about that. 89% of girls. And then the circumstances of homicide. I'm sure this number really speaks out to you in terms of intimate partner violence. So, argument and conflict precipitated by another crime, drug involvement are not as high as intimate partner violence. So when we think about what kinds of programs there are existing already within our community, whether they are CJRC or some other programs, then there are programs that can be knit together and assisted further if the assistance is necessary in order to make sure that those are uplifted. So social determinants of health are in 5 buckets under economic stability. So when we think about this, this Durham map of services, this tool that we will co-create, not just we, I mean we, the bigger we, the collective we, then I want people to think out of the box in terms of what they're doing and what they have been doing. From grassroots, where the rubber meets the road, and also systems that can support. And under economic stability, poverty, employment, food insecurity, housing instability. Under education, high school education, enrollment in higher education, language and literacy, early childhood education and development. Under health and healthcare, access to healthcare, access to primary care, health literacy. Under neighborhood and built environment, access to foods that support healthy eating patterns, because if someone lives in a low wealth community, there are no banks, there are no grocery stores, the sidewalks are in ill repair, there's poor lighting, but people say, okay, get healthy. And it's not possible because that's not in the built environment, but there are ways to get food to people that need healthy food. Lots of people in Durham are doing that. And so what I'm suggesting here is not create a new system where we have this huge system where, one entity provides food. I'm talking about at the community level with people that are already doing it, but have not been acknowledged for their great work. Quality of housing, crime and violence, environmental conditions, and lastly, social and community context, which we can all play a part in this. Social cohesion means that I see a person that has a need. Their need is to be connected to a job, connected to an experience, connected, to take them out of where they are and help them see a different way, a different place, a different path. Civic participation, discrimination, implicit bias. We all need to understand where our biases are. And if we don't understand how we can involve ourselves deeply in the community, and I may not look like somebody who's deeply or sound like somebody that's deeply involved in the community, except I was asked to be the facilitator of District 1 for 2 years. And before I was told, you're not from around here. I'm like, what? Anyway, and then dealing with incarceration as we do. So this pipeline of services tool will help us accomplish that. And so I'm going to stop sharing that and very briefly, hopefully share the tool, and then I will be done. Okay, let's see. Here it is. Hopefully I can get it. Now, I had this all worked out, and now I don't have it worked out anymore. So let's see how to do this. I can see it, but I don't think I can show it to you. Let me go through it, and I am so sorry. See, I had it all worked out. That's what I get. Oh, there it is. Okay, there it is. Okay. So this is the tool that anyone in the community can use. This is not for Wanda Boone. This is for anyone and for all of us who are on the task force. So the idea here is to provide this link to everybody. And there are lists of programs and services out there already. And so if they are and you just want to mention them, that's fine. This is not trying to reinvent some of the lists that are out there, but there's some unique services that are accomplished in Durham that, many people don't know about. So the name of the organization, are you or your organization registered as a 501c3 nonprofit? This is not required. If representing an organization, contact name, contact email, phone number. Where are your services provided in Durham? Are you working all over Durham? Are you East Durham or wherever? When did you start this service? Have you had any participant reviews of your program? Not required here. Because some people don't think about that when they actually do. Someone has said, thank you so much for providing what you did. They just need to think about it so that they know that they have some evidence that they have a program and that it works. If representing an organization, have you had an external evaluation of your programs? Not required here, but some people do. What need does your program fulfill? And then describe the need. Do you use a program developed by an outside entity or organization? Oh, I was playing with this, so that's why it says yes. Do you use arts in your program? Describe that. Do you use physical movement? Athletics can go here. Who do you primarily serve? Girls, women, boys, men. Do you serve primarily families? Yes, no. Do you have services that prevent violence? Describe that. And then under the social determinants of health, to help people identify their program. Do they do anything with employment, food, housing, substance use, mental health, wellness? And mental health wellness doesn't necessarily mean treatment. It could mean stress relief. And there are lots of programs that can even be incorporated into some other programs, and you link together in order to get that done. Education, those things that are mentioned, describe health and healthcare, health literacy, neighborhood and built environment. Do you provide meals to the community? If you're doing anything about environmental conditions, social and community context, community engagement leading to change in the social determinants of health. And I may break that up because that sounds like a whole lot of words, even when I'm trying to say it now. Discrimination, education or bridging the gap, incarceration, reentry, suspension, expulsion, diversion, substance use prevention, victims of crime, gun violence. And please, if there's something else that's not here, this is our list community. And so that can be there too. Overdose prevention. I will say that Durham is the only county in North Carolina that has more overdoses among Black people than white people. And so that's why this is here, because it's something important to remember. And then lastly, please provide information about other organizations or services not listed here. And so that's what I have for tonight, and the idea that I wanted to bring forward. And just to close, prevention today for a safer tomorrow. Thank you very much, and I will take any questions that you may have. We can.
So I just want to say thank you for bringing that to us. And the first thing in our bylaws, as far as our responsibilities, is doing a comprehensive review of institutional and community resources that are out here. And so this would give us a really good step toward doing that and meeting that part of our bylaws. We can talk about how to operationalize this later, but I did want to open the floor for any questions from the presentation.
Yes. Hey, Jesse.
Hello, Wanda. Hello, Dr. Boone. I just had two quick requests for edits on the document on the Google form.
Yeah.
One, I think maybe a fourth or a third of the way down, there's a question that said something about like, what needs do you meet? And then the options were yes or no.
I saw that too.
So just making sure you caught that. I think afterwards it sort of allows you to describe the need. So maybe it's supposed to say something like, do you meet a specific need, or I don't know. The second was a question around gender and age. And it was like boys, men, girls, women. I'd love if there was an option for queer, trans, or non-binary, like something along those lines that allows those who are serving folks that may not identify within the binary, especially I know I've seen different reports and heard stories, particularly around the issues that queer folks are facing as it relates to safety and wellness. And so that just feels really important to make sure that we incorporate. But I just want to echo everyone's positive and affirming feedback about this presentation. I feel like it's in the spirit and posture of listening. And that's such a big portion of the work that we're doing. And just being able to listen and solicit that feedback. And so as we're able, we can share out that Google form. I know people aren't excited about doing surveys, but if we can be creative, hopefully we can get more people to participate in.
Thank you very much. And those changes are on the way. I appreciate it.
Others, comments, questions?
Xavier, you're mentioning how to operationalize it, and to Wanda, to your point, I think you could probably expedite that process by starting with some of the community partners who are sort of umbrellas for lots of community or entities already, like the CJRC, the Local Reentry Council, who, as you know, is connected with dozens and dozens of grassroots organizations providing housing support and all kind of stuff. Stepping Up Initiative relies on that. Religious Coalition, has lots of. So again, rather than just putting out in the ether, like, can you distribute this to, these partners who already have lots of partners? They could be a distribution point, because I think the information gathered would be very useful for those coordinating entities, as well as to connect, us with those community partners we're not already aware of. Oh, and add Bull City United to the list, right? They have lots of community partners, and they are a known community partner for us.
Yes, thank you.
But you're probably going to discover 6-10 others that very few people know about, that are doing their good bit, unbeknownst to each other.
Absolutely. And I want to also say that associations, affiliations, individuals, coalitions. So this is not, just for brick and mortar. I mean, there are people who are out there who've been doing, especially anti-discrimination work, that need to be uplifted. So are there any other questions or comments?
Dr. Boone, we really appreciate you bringing this to us. There are a lot of organizations that kind of get lost in the weeds and overlooked, or sometimes we feel like they are only serving a small group that's not as important as those who serve the larger community. And there may be something that they're doing that can be scaled up, which of course will be our task to try to make that happen, right?
Yes,
so thank you so much for this. Thank you so much.
And the last thing that I'll say is that there's some organizations that don't have the access to the things that they need in order to expand capacity. I mean, I have goosebumps. All right, I'll stop.
So Marcia and I had conversations with Dr. Campbell about a month and a half ago about just trying to find all these different relationships. That's going to really help us find those connections. So thank you again for that presentation.
You're welcome.
We're going to send it over to Shanise to close us out in her own way. Thank you, everyone, for your time.
All righty. Hey, y'all. So let me share my screen. Just want to ground us in a poem that I really, really love, that I share a lot, by my homie Langston Hughes. 1 second. Alrighty. And it's called I Dream a World. I dream a world where no man will scorn, where love will bless the earth and peace its paths adorn. I dream a world where all will know sweet freedom's way, where greed no longer saps the soul, nor avarice blights our day. A world I dream where Black or white, whatever race you be, will share the bounties of the earth and every man is free, where wretchedness will hang its head and joy, like a pearl, attends the needs of all mankind. Of such I dream my world. And that's it, y'all. That's all I got. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Y'all have a great one.
Thank you.
Have a good night.